Welcome to Stories for the Future, the podcast about visionary ideas, urgent change, and the people daring to shape a better future. I'm Veslemøy Klaveness Berge, as always, and today's episode is something a little different and quite special, I would say. Last week, I had the privilege of moderating a panel at the Beyond Oil 2025 conference in Bergen, Norway. The session was called Actionable Hope in a Changing Climate Future, and it brought together voices from climate science, media, business, and the arts, all exploring how we find energy to act in a world that often feels overwhelming. I will admit, stepping into an academic setting like this, a bit outside my usual world, at least for many, many years, had me more nervous than expected, at least for the first few minutes. I'm editing that part out, so you won't hear it, but it really was a surprise to me because I thought that I don't know anyone here, so there's no need for me to be nervous. But that was exactly what I was. So isn't it interesting how our bodies and nerves sometimes just plays us a little trick? But anyway, it's also interesting regarding the different worlds that we work in and move between, how the settings can kind of surprise you a little bit. After I had settled my nerves a little bit, my panel was so great, and the conversation that followed was really interesting, warm, honest, and energizing, I would say. The panel, so knowledgeable and talking about hope from so diverse angles, really left me with a kind of hope that actually feels doable. Let me now briefly introduce them. Kiki Kleiven, the director of the Bjerknes Center for Climate Research, Petter Gulli, Chief Hope Officer and founder of 12 Years, Thea Emilie Maubach-Vindenes from Verdens Beste Nyheter, or World's Best News in English, and Anne Beate Hovin, Chair of the Future Library Trust. And you will hear them explain a little bit more about their work and themselves in the conversation. So, hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in. So, to kick it off, I would love to hear from all of you what hope actually looks like in your work. What does it mean to you in your work, not just in theory, but in practice? And while you answer this question, please feel free to tell us a little bit more about your work so that we can understand the link between your work and hope. So let's kick it off with you, Kiki. As our climate scientist, you're close to what is happening on the day-to-day basis. You see the black on white, all the bad things happening. What does hope look like for you?
Well, first of all, I've been an eyewitness to a lot of changes I worked with. Ever since I graduated my PhD in 2000, I'm a field scientist. I'm a marine geologist, work with past climate changes. So we go out in the ocean, we core deep sea sediments, and we look at what's natural variability, how the Earth actually is changing on a natural timescale as opposed to the really fast, rapid changes that we're seeing now. That's never been observed before. And we convey that. At the Bjerknes Center, we're both reconstructing, we're observing climate as it is changing today, and we're also using climate models to show various future pathways. So as the director of the center, I'm meeting people every from the grandparents' climate action to the CEO of BP, who I recently spent a lot of time with. So that's a huge range of people that you meet, and very, very different stories that's being told to these groups. And what it is about for me is, translating the knowledge and sciences into action. That's really what we want to try to do. And my job is really showing that every ton of CO2 that we do not emit, that we avoid, and that every adaptive thing we do matters. That's kind of creating hope. And in a way, my work, it's not just a feeling, it's a strategy. Hope is a strategy, working towards that. And in my work with climate science, it's also communication, hope looks like when people understand that their action matters, just not just because we're going to fix the climate overnight, but because it's building momentum for transformation that we need. We barely started it. It is underway, but it's not enough. So you can see hope in many ways. It's very sort of local is to see how knowledge is being integrated in shaping Bergen for a warmer, wetter, wilder future. Actually putting the knowledge in the ground with what piping we need and how we're going to get rid of overwater and how we're going to safe keep our little town. So that's just like to see how we're using the knowledge locally, but it also is to see businesses that are aligning with net zero strategies, or it's to see, which I want to talk about a little bit later, something that I just was witnessing, how future architects are using this knowledge when they're learning how to design houses for the future. But I want to share one very short story, and I'm going to do it very fast, because I got challenged recently about giving people more hope. So this is fun. I get invited to this, like, they call it high-level meetings. And this is where I met this BP CEO, and everybody in the room had blue suits on or blue vests. Vests are very in these days. So it was just me and a room full of the top business leaders from the Nordic countries, mostly Norway. And I was asked to give an update on the climate status, basically emissions, temperature, explaining why we have marine heat waves, the situation in Europe, Mediterranean this summer. So it was really hardcore climate sciences that I conveyed, not a story of hope, a story of challenges, a story of like how 10 years after the Paris Agreement, this is where we're at. And when I was finished, there was one question. One of these blue suit people dared to ask me, and I got really mad, and I couldn't flick him off because you don't do that when you're 55 or somebody says that's exactly when you can do it. But he stood up and he said, "But why aren't you providing us any hope? You're just like, all your curves are negative. You got to give us hope, and you got to have some positive stories at the end of your talk." And I was like, "How dare you? You represent billions of dollars in the room, thousands of employees. You're sitting on all the power. You're supposed to give me hope." And I was like, "That's like, you got to turn this around." So that's also a challenge, right? That doesn't make me so hopeful.
Thank you. Let's continue with you, Thea.
Wonderful.
You're the youngest in the panel, so it's very interesting to hear your perspective on this.
Oh, did you hear that? Sorry.
Yes, so I'm the spokesperson for the World's Best News, or Verdens Beste Nyheter, which is an information campaign that has the goal of spreading positive news about, or just news about the positive effects and the change that are happening in the world. And so it's based on the fact that we view the news and the media that you get today to be heavily reliant on the big red titles, and it's all about breaking news, and it's all about wars and crisis and everything that's extremely negative. And so we try to not take away from the negative news, because obviously we need to know what's really happening in the world, but we also deserve to know the positive changes that are happening. And global development, it takes time, and so we try to zoom a bit out and look at the wider picture, and give people the news that we think they deserve to hear. And to try to work against the apathy that we see happening in that way. And so hope in a really big way is the basis of all that I do and that we do. As we are called the world's best news, it's obviously a quite hopeful title. But I think it's really important to have the hope while looking at and dealing with the crisis that is happening, because climate change is real and war is real and all the crises that the world is facing are real, but in order to fight against them and in order to have the courage to stand up and to keep working, we need to know that there are other people out there that are also working to make a change. And so I would say hope is the basis of everything that I do in this work.
Yes. This is right up your alley, Petter. I know you have literally made hope your job title, right? Hope is your job title, and also your conference, your book.
Yes.
Hope is a big, red.
It's a brand.
Chief Hope Officer. What does it look like for you?
Well, I could just say what she said, and we can go to unravel. No, but yeah, I think for me it's I came from advertising. 30 years in advertising, or the turbo of consumerism, as I like to call it. And I think one of the reasons I quit my job was that I couldn't do that anymore, of course. But the thing is that I also saw that I thought the environmental organizations were not communicating in the right way. So my mission is that, and I have a mission. And then it came to when I wrote a book called Hope, A Practical Guide for Climate Optimists. I found my own mission, which is we must make people want to take part. And we have to make it easy for them to contribute. And we're not doing any of those. So I actually also could say we have to motivate people to. And that's not your leaders. I mean, fuck them. Honestly. They're supposed to give us hope. They're supposed to give Thea hope. They're supposed to give everybody else hope. But I think we have to show people that things is possible. I think there is. So we can, and I think we can create hope, not a flimsy, airy, wary kind of hope, but constructive hope. And I've collected some research from Generation Z, which is your generation, by the way. It says that, and I have to read this. I have to read. It says that Generation Z is more likely to mobilize through hope, concrete solutions and a sense of agency than through doom and gloom fear, provided that hope is credible and actionable. And then it has to be concrete. And I think that too much doomsday is not going to work. We have to show real progress and a greater future, that a greater future is actually possible without fossils. And so I think, because, or else we're going to get people not just giving up. And I think the most scary thing now is and the most important fight we're all going to fight is the fight against there's nothing I can do about this. I think Hannah Ritchie from Our World in Data, who wrote a wonderful book called Not the End of the World, can recommend that one. She said, if we're already screwed, what's then the point in trying? So we need to give people that kind of hope. So what is hope like for me? Seeing people getting energized, seeing the light. I mean, I did a speech for young people. I did a speech for the grandparents' climate action on Saturday, and having them see the light in their eyes, come up and say, "Oh wow, I got energized now." And that's what I see in my work. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show people what we can do. I talk a lot about innovation, things happening, the real concrete stuff. So not to make people sit back and go, oh yeah, it's already fixed, but not to make people say, hey, why are we not doing more of that? Why are we not doing more of that? How can Sweden do this and we not? How come, my God, I have to find a word in English first and then Norwegian first and then translate it. And it's just renewable energy I'm trying to find, so sorry. But how come the whole world is moving so fast on that and we're doing nothing here? I want that kind of stuff to happen, because and people ask if there's still a light in the tunnel, why are we not heading for that light? Because there is a light, but they need to see that light or they will not do anything. So yeah, I think just energizing people, and I do every Monday. I do a LinkedIn post called a more positive news morning. I do that every Monday now, where I list 8 to 12 things that went well in the world previous week. And then I can rant for the rest of the week. But I do that every Monday. And who's the people thanking me for that? That's interesting. That's sustainability professionals, all the people I know. I'm not doing it for the total audience. I'm doing it for those people who say, I need those posts every Monday, because I'm working with sustainability and I'm starting to feel in despair. We need to get that hope amongst our own people. Because if we give up, there's no hope left. Okay, I think I'll stop there.
Okay, to round it off, Anne Beate, you have this really long time horizon. So what does that have to say for your, like, how hope pops up in your work?
It's quite comforting, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can tell you where I'm coming from, because I've done a lot of things in my professional life. But in 2011, I met this wonderful artist, Katie Patterson. She's Scottish, and I think there's also people connecting to Scotland here, I heard. And she proposed this artwork called The Future Library. And she made it up, and I had to make it happen. But when she proposed to me, it's going to last for 100 years, I almost, oh no, please don't propose that. And she said, we're going to grow a forest. And we do now. There is a forest outside Oslo where we are growing a forest with 1,000 trees. And there is a silent room in the new public library in Oslo, made out of the trees that we cut before we planted new ones. And we commission one author every year for 100 years. We have 12 authors now, meaning it's been going on for 12 years. And they are invited to write a manuscript that is unpublished and unread until 2114. Nobody can read what they're writing. First one was Margaret Atwood. And we have Han Kang that won the Nobel Prize. We got her long before the Swedes. And then, just to mention, and also the last one we commissioned is Amitav Ghosh, whom I'm sure you know who is. And so they have to come to Oslo. They are writing this secret manuscript. They come to Oslo, and we walk into the forest together. It's a basic ritual, and it's the most important part for the authors to walk into that forest. And there's a really, really emotional ritual happening there. And but what's interesting about this work, and I have a 100-year contract with the municipality of Oslo, which means it is possible to commit politicians across budgets, across political parties' interests, and across elections. It is possible. So just to mention. So, and what's interesting about this work is that it resonates with people all over the world. And being together with researchers, I don't know what to say, because I've been listening, and it's so complicated. But of course, what is that about? It's across ethnicities, borders, religions, everything. So for me, at least, until you've done research on this, I say it's about basic human needs, and that we are in need of now, that we share, that we have in common. And then I want to say, what is hope? What does it look like? And I'm very much, when The Guardian wrote an editorial about this work some years ago, and they wrote, The Guardian's view on future library, hope in practice. I practice, I do it every day. And combined with Margaret Atwood, that what she taught me is about practical utopias. I believe in practical utopias, because practical utopias are within reach. I'm done with visions, almost, because I need those practical utopias. So on a personal note, I think that every day, every morning, like you do, and what I say is that both relational, because I think we need to go back to the relational parts of this. So every time I meet one, I think you are my practical utopia today. And physically, I believe in creating beautiful things. So, and another thing I just want to put, and then I finish, is that I think it seems like hope can be organized in a way, which means building communities, relational, and I'm learning this now following on Instagram what's happening in the US. It makes me so hopeful, not the Trump side, I'm sorry, but what I'm seeing of how 7.5 million, maybe 8 million people actually mobilized, starting local, between you and me, and then building up, and then suddenly there were 8 million. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all. Great start. I would like to go a bit deeper into a term that I personally feel very connected to, which is urgent optimism. It's kind of, I strongly feel what that is about myself. So this tension between feeling the urgency of the crisis and still finding a way to keep going. And looking at you, Kiki, because I can just imagine how that you must feel this urgency all the time. So how do we hold both the pressure to act now and the stamina to stay hopeful in the long run? So, Petter, let's start with you now. How do you stay urgent without tipping over?
Oh my God. Well, I think, well, it's quite simple for me in one way, because I do subscribe to all these newsletters giving me positive news. But I think it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. You want to give up sometimes. You think this is not possible. People are, and I think that's something I didn't say earlier on when I said that we have to fight the fact that, and we have to fight the notion of there's nothing I can do about it. I think Nina Figueres said it, and the UN climate boss, I think, yeah. She said on a podcast half a year ago, I listened to it, and she said that we're past climate denial. Nobody's climate change deniers anymore. We're in the second denial, and that is. Yes, climate change is real, but there's nothing we can do about that. And I think it's not really hard to get the urgency, because just read the news. You see it all the time, and you have to just and try to remind people around you all that stuff. And then, but for me, and then I just need to see if I can put a positive twist to it, but because I mean I believe in what you said, right? I think that hope can be created by actually showing people that something is actually happening somewhere. We can, because this is happening. The problem is, of course, living in Norway with oil on that. It's you get an election and you look at the politicians after the election and say, okay, what's going to happen now? Not sure if I answered your question, but the more I sit in panels like this, the more politician I get, I guess.
So Kiki, as a climate scientist, we talked about it before. I can just imagine wanting to almost scream because the world is talking about. You feel that it's so urgent that we should only be working on this in a way. That is how I feel sometimes, that we're talking about so unnecessary stuff. How do you deal with it? And you mentioned the blue suits. You want to scream at them almost. But,
well, I think a lot of people, they think that I'm a sort of very optimistic and very happy person, and very often I am. But I get really angry. I get extremely moody. I get pissed. I'm more often angry than I'm happy. And I don't think people always know that. They think, oh, she must be very social. No, I'm not. I like to go home and be alone. By that I mean really alone. I don't want to be around human beings because I get really tired of human beings married sometimes. And I got to be honest about that. I think it's extremely tough to convey just pure science. Because these numbers do not lie, right? And they're rapidly increasing. I grew up in the 70s. The CO2 in the atmosphere, so I'm going to be a little bit scientific now. Parts per million. Does everybody know parts per million? That's how we measure CO2 molecules in the atmosphere, right? ppm. It's like a hot thing. So in the 70s, it increased about 1.58 ppm per year, every year. So the Keeling curve is famous measurements. We're doing it. We're measuring it several places in the world. Also in Svalbard, we're measuring CO2 in the atmosphere. We've done it since 1958. And this is like rock solid data. And before 1958, we have it from bubbles in ice cores. So we know for 1 million years that we never had the content of CO2 in the atmosphere that we have now. So 1.58 every year. Duck, 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 duck. You know what it is now? 3.54 every year. 3.54. We're leaping. We're not just increasing, we're leaping year after year. Hopeful, urgency. Climate in itself is, we know that we should have had the really rapid urgency in terms of mitigation, right? We had to cut so fast. But at the same time, we need to have the endurance to see that we got to be in it for a very long time. It's not just enough to cut. If we cut today, sea level is going to continue to rise for 400 years. So the long-term perspective, to be in it, to build these future resilient, hopeful, good, safe societies means that we have to be in it for generations. You know, there's somebody's going to read those deposited manuscripts 100 years from now, right? 2140.
88 years, actually.
Yeah, right. So then we're going to look back. How do we stay in it for such a long time? So I think it's difficult. The sense of urgency, and at the same time also the endurance to stay in for a long time. And I think it's right to have emotions. It's good to have emotions. It's good to show that you're angry. It's good to show that, you know what, I've had it now with just misexplaining and trying to come up with new stories. And a little bit about what you spoke about this morning, Naomi. I'm also seeing that, you know, it's trickling in here too, how all these new stories are coming with, oh, let's get women back to the kitchen. Let's get the treadwives in. Let's change this. It's so expensive. We should spend our money elsewhere. I mean, all these stories, they're all made up by somebody, right? And that is like, get me so mad sometimes.
But that's a very good, let me ask you then. You already said it, actually, that there is room for anger. And I also open it up for the rest of you. Is there room for anger? Petter?
Well, I think there's a misunderstanding about hope, or at least you could define hope in many ways. And I think, and my definition is that hope is the mother of anger and action. Because if there's no hope left, I mean, if the water's going to rise, and you have a house down there, you're going to move your house. Anger is going to be futile because there's nothing you can do with it anymore. But if there's a glimpse of hope that you can fix it, and the politicians are not doing anything, big business is not doing anything, then you will start fighting. So I think we have a definition discussion about hope in the environmental business, I guess. I don't think Greta Thunberg agrees with me, but I think that hope can fuel anger, hope can fuel action, and that's the only hope I believe in. And I think, of course, we're allowed to be angry. And I wanted to say something which is a little bit of despair for me as well, is that in this world now, it's going to be harder than ever to convince people. I mean, it's so obvious to us, right? It's so obvious, and still they're not doing it. So you want to run your head into a wall. And then we have, like you said also, we have the strong men now. We got Putin, Trump, Netanyahu. You have all these things happening at the same time, and we have to fix and I hear people who used to talk about climate say, no, we have to fix the fence first. And that narrative is changing in Norway now. A friend of mine said, no, we have to do that. We have to put climate to the side for a while. What do you say about that, climate scientist?
No, I've heard those. Put it aside because there's a war. Put it aside because there are other things that matter. Well, it's a crisis multiplicator, right? All crises are enhanced because of climate.
Yeah.
Yes, about the anger part, I definitely think there's room to be angry. And as for myself as well, I'm not an optimistic, positive person. Somebody once said to me, well, you must be the most positive person ever. And my fiancé was standing behind me and he laughed out loud. I'm not full of hope. I'm really not. A lot of my hope is built on anger. We've already joked that I'm the youngest one in this panel. I am born in 2004, and I was a part of the Fridays for Future, the school strikers. And my reason for being here and why I am a part of this climate movement is based on anger. I don't think I should have had to be a part of this fight already. As a young person, and especially when I was younger, it's a huge responsibility that we place upon young people to scream and to protest and to make sure politicians are not putting this to the side. Because I truly believe that if we had lost those voices, then it would have been put aside even further back than right now. Yeah. I think we depend on those voices that we shouldn't necessarily have to depend on. So there's definitely room for anger, but I also think that anger can be a very good thing, and I think that we need to come together in that anger and not sit just by ourselves and be angry, but realize that that anger can lead to hope and it can lead to action. But I still dream of a world where I didn't have to be so angry so early.
Yeah. I saw your question when you sent that, and I was thinking, well, I'm not so into anger anymore. It's probably an age thing, by the way. But I can get very angry, of course. But I'm also into our perception of time. And that is something that has been challenged me through the Future Library project, because it's one thing is the deep time, really understanding what is deep time and what that means to us. But also my presence on Earth, which is more, I'm thinking more and more now that it's 100 years ahead. It's about grandchildren growing up. And it's also, I come from a farm, which is very old. My last name, Norwegian, would understand, Hovin, is a typical farm name, Viking graves and stuff. So, and that means 100 years backwards. So my presence is not while I'm living, but it's actually 200 years maybe. And that is also changing how I think and how I approach life. And so for me, it's the intergenerational kind of justice perspective that is also quite mobilizing. I'm thinking, for instance, when you're initiating a project that you cannot finish, you have to trust the coming generations. That is something very committing in a different way, but it's very mutual. This is something I will address in talks and when I communicate about the project, because they need to trust us. Not yet born, but they need to trust us, which means that we have to start these cross-generational projects that takes time. It's not only short-termism, but long-termism. And they need to trust us that we actually start and care now for them to have something to finish. Do you understand? But I can get really mad too, but not so often with Future Library, actually.
Let's continue a little bit with that, because time is a topic here, and hope often stretches between the future we imagine and what we do right now. So the balance between that, how do we stay connected to the bigger picture without losing the momentum in the day-to-day? So for instance, Thea and you're kind of like, you're in the now, you're in the future. So how do you see imagination as a kind of a form of action? And how do you use that in your work?
Yes, all the time you can get me going now, because again, I'm quoting Margaret Atwood, because when she was commissioned to write a manuscript for us, she was quoted in the New York Times or something that she said the world needs some powerful news stories telling us how the world needs to change and how we can change with it. So I'm thinking about future literacy constantly, future skills. I think art and culture is so much needed now to build resilience, because that has to do with imagination. Because as long as we can imagine, we can also create. So this is why I think that layer of sensing, we had a discussion in one of the breakouts today about sensing the bodily experience that needs to be connected so that people connect emotionally. I'm sure now that a lot of researchers are thinking, oh, that's so complicated, how this is connected. So please start researching on it, because we need it. There's some experience, at least from the field, that there is something here with a layer that art and culture and imagination is a very important future skills.
Yes.
Does it make sense?
Yes,
Good.
absolutely.
This is something I really want to tell.
Yeah, I agree so much. And Petter, we talked about this before, how important it is for us to be able to imagine the future that we really want to live in. And you inspired me this summer, I told you, because you had this scenario that you...
Arendal's Uka 2040,
yes.
yeah.
And I'm sure you academics, you have a better word for this, but I heard this word, trutopia. Like not utopia, but trutopia, something which is more realistic, but it's a world that we want to live in. So can you share a little bit about that? That's
Or the thing I did in 2040.
Yeah,
2040.
yeah.
Oh, but that was okay.
No,
I don't have it here. So, but it was just. I mean, I was in a fireside chat with Karen O'Brien from University of Oslo, and we asked to talk about transformation in the future, and then to make a vision of 2040. So I just did a vision of Christian Radich entering Arendalsuka, where Norway's first Minister of Circularity, Ingrid Liland from MDG, from the Green Party, went up on deck, where she met Guri Melby from Venstre, another Green Party, and she was head of innovation in Norway, and then the boat was steered by one from Høyre and one from Labour and one from Høyre. And we had and it was just to provoke some thoughts. What would happen if the kind of the centrics and the environmental parties went together and made a common vision? I think that's what I'm trying to say is that I think one of the problems is that in this room and in this institution, there is one language. In business, there's one language. In the environmental movement, there is one language. And out there, the people, there are many different languages as well, but there's one language in a way. And we don't share the same language, we don't share the same vision. I'm into visions, though I really understand what you were saying. I thought it was really interesting. But I think but I don't call it vision. What you said, I didn't think it pictures of the future. Can we envision or picture a common future? And I think we kind of need to get academia, students, people, and business and environmental movement together, and politicians to agree on it. If we were able to make, and I mean, this is the Beyond Oil conference, right? We're talking about beyond oil. So what's after oil? If you ask any Norwegians, they have no fucking, no idea. I don't think there's any idea. Oh, we have this oil fund, and and what's we going to do? Bore ourselves to death? I mean, there should be a vision or a shared picture of a shared future, because then we could say, hey, didn't we agree? And you could use like the democratic people panels, what do you call that in English, Folkepanel? You can do that to get to make democracy something that people could take more part of. And if you could find that kind of vision or picture, people could say, but didn't we all agree that we should go there? Yeah, so why are you deciding that? We were supposed to do that with business. Why are you not doing it? But today there's no clear target or goal. Except that we know in 88 years there's going to be some wonderful manuscripts somewhere. Was that?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good. Kiki, I was thinking about you working on you have this, like, I'm a geophysicist, so I also used to work on these really long timelines.
Billions of years.
So how does that teach you something when you look at the timeline and like back in history and into the future, what we need to do today in order to get where we want to be? Like, how do you use like backcasting? Is that what it's called? What do we need to do today? How do you use that do you use it in your work?
Well,
climate scientist.
I wrote a book 2 years ago together with a history professor here at UIB. We wrote about kind of human history and climate over the last 10,000 years. You could be really dystopic and go further back in time, which shows that our planet is most likely going to do pretty well without us through its natural evolvement. That's completely dystopic. Going back in history is also to see how societies respond to natural climate changes. How do we respond? You know, the Roman War Imperia, how they made use of warmer Mediterranean water and more rain to build this really smart society, because they could feed armies. And when you had extra food, you also had the possibility to sit down and start thinking. And when you start thinking, you become innovative. And then other situations where you got, you know, rapid volcanoes that would lead to cooling again in the circum-Atlantic region, most societies, how they were affected and were your rulers smart? So they put aside food or grains. Did they store water? It's incredible how good we were, for instance, with water before. It's enough to take a trip to Algeria and Tunisia and see what doesn't exist anymore, but what did exist, the longest aqueduct in the world, 134 kilometers into the water sources that were these old sort of stored under desert water sources in Africa. They don't exist anymore. It's Drath in Tunisia. They had enormous water storage capacities fed by these aqueducts. It doesn't exist anymore. When are we going to try to find back to some of that knowledge of how we endure and how we build societies? Because there is actually a lot in history that's telling us that, you know, we learn to live with long-term weather changes that become climate if it's lasting for a long enough time, but that we had some inherent knowledge and inherent background that we carried with us that made societies more adaptable and more resilient. And all of that worked pretty well until everything accelerated around coal, gas, and oil later on. That's a different story, but there are actually real wonderful stories about how we act as societies, and some really fun ones. Like there were 3 really bad years in a row in Sweden around year 700, 750. You know, the first year they slaughtered horses for the gods. The second year they slaughtered slaves for the gods. And the third year they took the king, and then the rain came the next year, and it was good. And you don't really know what was the reason, right? So some of them are fun too, but we seem to have lost part of our history, right? We seem to have done that, and I think we should bring that back. We have something called klimathon instead of hackathon. We have a klimathon, and several in the room has been part of that. Håvard has been part of it. Various people here has been part of it. Where we go to municipalities. And we pose a question. And for instance, last year it was in Haugesund, south of Bergen. And the question was, what can we learn from cultural heritage in kind of building and drainage? And basically, how do we kind of keep buildings with old traditions? And over a couple of days, we sit and discuss that and bring in necessary knowledge and try to solve these questions. These kind of gatherings of, you can call it gatherings of hope, but it's sharing of knowledge. And it's also understanding that along the way of becoming one of the richest, most digitized, and God knows everything, not the happiest, but almost there, country in the world, on the way, we lost part of our history. On the way, we lost things that we used to value, that we just set aside. We have to try to find that. That's also part of who we are, and it needs to be part of the future storytelling of what Norway is going to be. Because we had really good storytellings before. We did build up an incredibly strong welfare state. That's a beautiful story. You know, we decided that we're gonna start using the resources in Norway with hydropower. That's also a beautiful story. It built wealth and richness in many countries, many parts of Norway. And of course, Lykkelandet, the happy story from 1969, January, when we found oil at Ekofisk, and the rest is another story. Now we have to make that story. And we have to decide how are we going to use part of our knowledge and culture to build that story, but also integrate from other countries. Because that storytelling is ongoing in the other Nordic countries. We just decided to keep our brown story going and rolling on. Unfortunately, we still believe in that story.
Yes. I would like to. Oh, you have some comments.
I just started thinking, because I've been listening here all day, and I for instance, the previous author to Future Library was Tommy Orange. I don't know if you know who he is. He's an American indigenous. And he writes about intergenerational traumas and learning about history and storytelling and going backwards. I think also, and hearing about the oil kind of story, not wanting to realize that it's so embedded in us, the pioneering, proud story about oil, to put it that way. I also, we were celebrating 200th anniversary of migration to America this year, and it's hardly no one questioning, who did we meet there? Who was there when we came? And there's hardly any research done on that part. There's a book called The Nordic Whiteness, and it says, amongst a lot of things, that we were poor, very poor, but we were on top of the hierarchy of whiteness. I'm sure that combination isn't that very good, to be honest. But we need that kind of stories too, because I think the future is about justice. It's about humanism. We need to question these kind of myths about ourselves too. I'm sorry to bring that to the.
Thank you. Petter, did you want to say something or?
No, it's just one thing that I think and maybe Thea can comment on this as well, because I realized that in some of my I do a lot of keynote speeches about consumption. That's coming from advertising. I talk a lot about consumption, and I had this slide which says just a number on it. It's 176%, and that is the increase of consumption in Norway from 1980 till 2018. It was almost a tripling. And then I would just look around in the audience and see if there's people who's older than born in 1980. And I say, what's könsmoden in English?
You produce.
Okay, Norwegians understand. Who were able to have sex in 1918. I was like, who were, what's the word? Come on.
Könsmoden är lite
I'm not sure.
mer.
Yeah, it's more than that.
Well,
Okay.
Remember, it's a podcast.
It's a podcast. Oh my God. Anyway, the thing is that who had their own money could buy stuff in 1980, and people go like that. Yes. And I said, okay, so we bought a lot of stuff. Yeah, was that great? Yeah, and everybody agrees. And I used to do that, and then someone came up to me, a young person came up to me and said, you can't do that. You can't talk about the future like that. No, the past like that. We're not connecting at all. It's like my father started to talk to me what happened 45 years ago in 1980. When in 1980, that would be 1935. I wouldn't care. It was like, so we're not connecting. And I think I said that to the grandparents' climate action, that we can't talk about the past. We have to talk about a future inspired by the past, yes, about methods, about things we did, but we seem to too often, in my opinion, to go backwards and talk about, oh yeah, you remember when we were young. And we're not connecting.
Do you want to comment? Yeah.
You don't have to agree with me.
No, but I do agree, because my generation will never experience that past, and there is a lot of things that we have to change about the way we behave, our habits, our spending habits, how much water we use. There's a lot of things that we are expected to change about the way that we live. And we will not be able to just use and buy in the same way that was possible, that was done before. And so I think we need to learn from the past and bring with us the important things that history has brought us. But it's also extremely important to connect together about this shared future, because we need everyone to be involved if we are to change the way we are going to behave and the way the world is going to move. And we can't wait another generation like we were able to do before.
I will let Thea, the youngest in the panel, have the last word, because she is, of course, totally right. We can't wait another generation. That is not an option. What stood out to me most was the honesty in this conversation, and also the acknowledgement that hope isn't always easy, but it's essential, that anger and urgency have a place, and that actionable hope can be found in many places and has many forms. I really enjoyed both the panel conversation and the conference in general. So many interesting topics, great researchers presenting their work, and an absolutely fantastic atmosphere all through the 2 days. One thought that stayed with me afterwards, though, was this. While we talked a lot about systems change, I couldn't help noticing how few people from the oil and gas industry itself were in the room. The very systems that we're trying to shift, and the people in the center or between the beyond, and the oil. It left me wondering again, as I always do, how do we create spaces where all voices can meet and feel welcome across sectors, ideologies, and bubbles of different sizes to imagine new paths forward together? This is the big question, for me at least. So, if this episode sparked something in you, please consider sharing it with someone you think needs a little light in the tunnel, or better yet, someone who might help build that tunnel forward. Links to everything will be in the show notes. As always, thank you for listening to Stories for the Future. Stay hopeful and keep imagining the world we want to live in. Take care and see you next time.